Welcome to Dadograms. Have you tried transferring money lately, only to look at your confirmation screen and suddenly realize your banking app sent it to the wrong account? I'm not talking about a few dollars accidentally floating off into the ether somewhere. I'm talking about real money here. The kind where your heart rate jumps a bit and your brain sparks to life because you've got to undo it quickly. I'm Jason M. Garrett, and I've been noticing this more and more lately. For years, banking transfers were second nature to me. I've never thought about them. My thumb just simply knew what to do. I'd open up the app, I'd hit transfer, and money would move from one account to the other. Easy, effortless, like getting on a bicycle and going for a ride. That was muscle memory doing the thing that it's always supposed to do, freeing my mind of other more important tasks. And yet, recently, I found myself slowing down, hesitating, even feeling that strange mental burn when you have to intentionally think through something that you used to do effortlessly thousands and thousands of times before. Suddenly it feels hard. It is a weird sensation, almost like a tiny headache deep inside. And I honestly thought for a moment, is this me? At 53 years old, am I slipping? Is this just what it feels like to get older? But no. As it turns out, it's not my age, it's not memory loss, it's not brain fog. It's the banking apps. They've changed the rules people have been using for the last 45 years. That's right. Banks took a system that worked flawlessly since the 1980s, a straightforward from one account to another account, and they flipped it without any explanation, without any warning, and without the slightest awareness of the impact that kind of change has on millions of us who have spent decades wiring our minds to do it the other way. And let me tell you something, 45 years of muscle memory, it does not go quietly. It fights back, it stumbles, it rebels, it causes errors and a hell of a lot of frustration. It makes you feel like your own brain betraying you when in reality, it's the software, their software, not yours. It's the same as if someone had re-rigged your bike so that left is right and right is left, and then said, relax, go for a ride. You'll figure it out. Now, if you're not quite following along yet, it might be because you haven't been moving a lot of money around between banks for very long. But back in the 1980s, when banking started shifting from paper slips and tellers to computers and early ATMs, the natural human logic was simple. You take money from one account and you move it to another account. That's the way the systems were built. That's what makes logical sense. That's the way the world works. If you're going to take something and move it somewhere, you have to pick it up first and then move it to someplace, right? Through the 90s and early 2000s, when online banking emerged, the industry kept the same structure because it made sense. Even when smartphones came around and banks built the first generation apps, they kept the exact same order. Then somewhere between 2015 and 2020, everything started to shift. Why? Fintech apps. Venmo, Cash Apps, PayPal, Zelle, they rose to power, and the young generation who adapted them very quickly learned to think about transactions in a totally different order. For them, the question wasn't where am I moving money from, it was where am I sending it to. They grew up with a destination-first way of transferring money. And because banks desperately want to appear current and streamlined, they've started to copy the fintech model. So in the early 2020s, one by one, major banks quietly rolled out updates that completely rewire the transfer process. Most of the banks I use have not actually done this, but the bank I use 60% of the time has done that. That's Navy Federal Credit Union, and I hate it. They didn't tell us why. They didn't ask if we preferred the old logic. They didn't offer a toggle for classic mode. Nope. They simply flipped the order and expected everyone, especially the people with the most money, to adapt without complaint. And that's the part that really bothers me. The people who genuinely needed to learn how to function in the adult world of banking, the young folks, are the ones being accommodated. Meanwhile, those of us who have spent decades doing it correctly and consistently are now being treated like we're the ones struggling to keep up. It's backwards. If you ever used Facebook back in the early 2000s when they were obsessed with redesigning everything every few months, you'll remember what it was like, that feeling of irritation, that moment when you logged in just to check something really quick, just to find out they'd shuffled everything around and the one thing you wanted was shoved off into some menu you couldn't find, and it would take you 10 or 15 minutes to search for it. Most of us eventually said, you know what? This is a waste of my time and I don't need this. And we walked away. I did. I don't use Facebook anymore because of that very reason. And that works on social media. But it's not so easy when you're dealing with your bank. And that's frustrating to me. You see, when something you've done flawlessly for decades suddenly requires conscious thought, your brain has to switch from autopilot to manual. That shift has a real cost. It drains your attention, it increases the chances of mistakes, and takes away from doing other, far more important things, and it leaves us confused, mentally disoriented, or unsettled about the tasks that used to be effortless. Imagine that if to ride your own bicycle, you had to concentrate every single moment you were on it so that you didn't fall over. That's not the way a bike works, is it? And that's not the way your banking should work either. It feels very much like that to me. And it's not aging, it's interference, the mental kind. When expectations collide with reality, your brain lights up like a fire alarm. The feeling, that pause, is not your failure. It's the result of someone changing a system that didn't need to be changed. Okay, so that's the effect. But why'd they do it? Have you thought about that? Why would they make this change? Well, banks didn't switch this way to make life easier on us by any means. They switched it because, as I mentioned earlier, younger users think in destination-first patterns. That's what they're trained on when they use things like Zelle or PayPal. Payment apps train them that way. But also, some would argue that banks are facing some real crisis when it comes to competing against the new cutting-edge technology. They hate being seen as old-fashioned. They want to innovate too, so that's part of it. Then, apparently, and this one actually surprised me, they want to reduce calls and complaints from new users who were confused about how to move money from to. Do you get that? The new kids who have no money in their accounts to actually transfer around couldn't figure out how to do what we've been doing for the last 2 generations. So the banks decided it was most efficient to force us, people who've been doing it for generations the other way, to relearn it instead of having the new kids learn to do it our way. So the people who actually have money and who have been banking responsibly for decades are now the ones being slowed down so that the banks can impress people with $112 in their checking account. Tell me how that makes sense. And for those of you younger folks out there still listening to me and laughing and thinking this is funny, it's actually a warning to you. Because one moment you're going to blink your eyes and a few decades are going to go by and the same kind of stuff is going to be happening to you. As you get shoved aside, treated like you're unimportant or irrelevant, despite the fact that you'll be the ones who are hiring and firing employees, taking out massive loans for business expansion, and, well, literally the ones running the world like me and those in my age group are doing right now. When it happens to you, it's going to be frustrating. I guarantee it. For the rest of us, I'm a military guy. In the Navy, when the systems changed, whether it was procedures, cockpit layout, deployment cycles, we didn't whine about it. We didn't ignore it either. We adapted intentionally. We reprogrammed our minds and redeveloped new muscle memory. And we do it in a way that respected the reality of the change instead of pretending that we woke up knowing the new rules automatically. Same here, folks. Take it step by step. First, slow down. Just for now. A moment of caution beats a mistaken transfer. Believe me, I know. Heck, I even made a mistaken transfer earlier this morning. I still can't quite beat that muscle memory out of my head yet. Next, read carefully each button and slide you use to transfer money. Know where it is going to, where it is coming from, and how much. Next, rewire deliberately. Make a few small transactions with full attention. Train the new pattern. Again, I need to take my own advice here. Okay, so that's the steps. That should be able to get it all done. But how about this one? Now to think about it, why don't you go ahead and call your bank and let your voice be heard about this new change if it bothers you like it bothers me. If they're going to waste your time on this kind of stuff, you might as well waste theirs calling in and complaining. What the hell, right? And use your experience as a competitive advantage now. You now understand both systems. You can do it both ways, old and new. So embrace those cash apps that aren't banks. The ones we've been avoiding up until now because they're a little different. And of course, talk to others your age or older. Most of them are experiencing the same kind of mental friction, but thinking it's just aging. It's not. You explaining this to them is a gift. So the next time you transfer money, pay attention to your own reaction. Did it feel smooth and automatic the way it used to? Or did you hesitate, even for half a second, because the steps no longer matched your brain's expectations? The half-second pause is the cost of a system redesign nobody asked for. And in a world where the ground is shifting under our feet without warning all the time, the people who thrive are the ones who notice the shift and choose how to respond, not the ones that wake up feeling like they've suddenly lost a step. So recognize the change, adapt intentionally, and don't let a poorly communicated update convince you that your mind is slipping when it's actually working exactly the way it should. I'm Jason M. Garrett, and this has been your Dadogram.